For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tess, and I grew up in this church. I confess I have a love-hate relationship with it. That is because on one hand, I craved the support my family and I received during my 3 cancer struggles. Through the wonderful people here, and on the other hand, because I found religious platitudes generally unhelpful, if not supremely annoying, in conquering a medical illness. But I survived to become a high school science teacher. You would think I've been punished enough. But that was my choice. I love all science, revere all predators, and I'm especially fascinated with sharks. I love teaching. I wish more of my teenagers loved learning. And I agreed to do this sermon with the hope that you may find something interesting in my perspective on the relationship between science and religion. When I was 7 years old, I was part of a normal middle to upper class family, was surrounded by love, enjoyed learning, even the rules that accompanied school. I had Christmases with lots of cousins, and I had been to Disney World, which was the greatest thing ever, which also brought out the thrill seeker in me. I could not get enough of Tower of Terror. There's something about being dropped that many stories that's just awesome. Then reality slapped me in the face. When I was supposed to be on a family vacation, drifting on an inner tube down the Frio River, I found myself in a Uvalde emergency room, being diagnosed with leukemia. After a stint in San Antonio Hospital to stabilize me enough for travel, I was life-flighted to Corpus Christi, where I was met by a doctor who flat out told me I had cancer, and if I did not cooperate with treatment, I would die. This would not be easy news to digest by anyone, and certainly not by someone with only a first-grade education. So naturally, I was fascinated by the reactions of adults who came in and out of my view. My parents read books about leukemia, explained procedures as best they could, tried to offer incentives for my compliance to make it fun. They gave me a real stethoscope and blood pressure device, not toys, and I grew up fast. That was one approach, relatively scientific. The other approach came from people who told me things like, everything happens for a reason. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. Or my personal favorite, God is testing you. Those platitudes did not give me any control over my life or death and struck me as utterly useless. Even a 7-year-old can see the injustice of cancer and the insult of God wanting to do this to me. So I rebelled against the religious viewpoint. I became a person of science. When the doctors told me that today I was receiving the yellow medicine, I would correct them and I say, "You mean methotrexate." My reality was not fun, but it was knowable. So you will understand that for some time, I held to a quote by Carl Sagan. It is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. It was my thinking, religion made people put their heads down and not look at the science. And in my situation, delusion was hardly satisfying or reassuring. And I have even made it clear in my classroom. This is not a place for religion. This is a place for science. And I thought I had found a balance, an irrefutable dichotomy. Science versus religion. Then, as I was looking for quotes for my students, I came across a different quote by Carl Sagan. "Skeptical scrutiny is the means in both science and religion by which deep thoughts can be winnowed from deep nonsense." I'll say it again. Skeptical scrutiny is the means in both science and religion by which deep thoughts can be winnowed from deep nonsense. And that is the inspiration for this sermon. How is there any commonality between science and religion? And how can it involve skeptical scrutiny, which I consider the sole provenance of science? Is there something about religion that is more than just the absence of science? Does skeptical scrutiny based on science cross over to influence religion and vice versa? Are religious beliefs sometimes conducive to science, or do they inevitably pose obstacles to scientific inquiry? To answer this question, we must analyze what we know of science and of religion and how they relate to each other. I always considered science to be the study of the natural world. In contrast, religion was the study of the supernatural world and its imposing relationship to the natural world. But what does religion encompass when we look at it? As defined by anthropologists, it is broadly comprised of social traits that can be compared and studied, such as rituals, dietary restrictions, and belief system. Science is backed by evidence, but in his essay, Science and Religion, published in 1954, Einstein famously said, "Science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind." While I am not a theologian, I did some research on some high-profile religions to focus on how they dealt with scientific inquiry, looking for areas of skeptical scrutiny. I learned that those who have gone before me on this quest have identified 4 models for the science-religion relationship. First, there is the conflict model, in which science and religion are always at odds with each other. Second is the independence model, in which science and religion explore separate domains and should never overlap. Third is the dialogue model, where science and religion have a mutualistic relationship with common ground and one encourages the other. Fourth is the integration model, extensive in its unification between science and religion. I always thought of religion in terms of the first 2 models, forever in conflict or forever separate. But I did not find examples of religions that fell into those models. I began to wonder if the misrepresentation of certain religions by certain influential persons through the years might give the appearance of these 2 models when the religions are not so hospitable to science. As we all know, religion can be co-opted for other political or social purposes that are not consistent with their historical integrity. That left models of dialogue and integration. Then I found another interesting categorization based on the idea that early religions developed because people asserted supernatural explanations when they lacked understanding of the natural causes underlying those extraordinary events. With the ignorance of people and fear and apprehension of the natural environment, they would try to bribe or persuade the gods, thereby gaining a sense of control. In that regard, it has been proposed that societies evolve in predicted ways. First, the religious stage. Second, the metaphysical, often involving a non-intervening God. And third is the positives or the science stage. This, however, did not explain the different cultures in different places, and it does not account for what we might be seeing in terms of relapse from more advanced stage to the more primitive stage among certain believers. As I delved into the mission of some of the more prominent religions, I found a common theme: the desire to understand the natural world as God's creation. By understanding nature, they would understand God. For instance, Christianity was built on Greek philosophy and pagan traditions in which our physical, natural existence was considered the book of nature, from which we could all receive God's revelations. But as time went on, church fathers felt that Scripture was needed to interpret nature because God had infused the material world with symbolic meaning, which, if properly understood by man, would reveal higher spiritual truths. And we all needed help interpreting the complexity found in nature. Original sin is used to describe humans as we are now. After the fall of Adam and Eve, our senses got dimmer and we became less intelligent. So we must supplement reasoning with specialized instruments like microscopes and telescopes. According to modern scholars, Christianity played a part in catalyzing the scientific revolution. For instance, monks saved and cultivated the remnants of ancient civilization during the barbarian invasions. Medieval churches promoted learning and science through sponsorship of many universities, which grew rapidly in Europe in the 11th and 12th centuries. And St. Thomas Aquinas, the church's model theologian, not only argued the reason is in harmony with faith, he recognized that reason can contribute to understanding, revelation, and so encouraged intellectual development. Pope John Paul II, in a speech given on October 22, 1996, to the Pontifical Academy of Science entitled, "Truth Cannot Contradict Truth," stated that new knowledge has led to the recognition of the theory of evolution as more than a hypothesis. In the science community, a hypothesis is a possible explanation of phenomenon, while theory is something that has an extraordinary amount of evidence to support the conclusion and is therefore more widely accepted. Pope Francis recently said, "On the risk but that is not so. God created human beings and let them develop according to the internal laws that he gave to each one so they would reach their fulfillment," which while not a complete endorsement to Darwin's theory of evolution, it attempts at a reconciliation between science and Catholicism. The Church of England in 2008 went much further in a message entitled "Good Religion Needs Good Science," written by Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown, director of the Mission of Public Affairs of the Archbishop's Council. The church said, "Charles Darwin, 200 years from your birth, the Church of England owes you an apology for misunderstanding you and by getting our first reaction wrong, encouraging others to misunderstand you still. We tried to practice the old virtues of faith-seeking understanding and hope that makes some amends." He went on to state, "People and institutions make mistakes, and Christian people and churches are no exception. When a big new idea emerges that changes the way people look at the world, it's easy to feel that every old idea, every certainty is under attack, and then to do battle against the new insights." Islam, a widespread religion, is monotheistic with a God that speaks through prophets. In 758 to 1258, early years of Islam, science was heavily promoted and many discoveries were made by those of the Islamic religion, especially in the field of medicine. According to Mir Tahim Ansari in Destiny Disrupted, The great Muslim philosopher associated spirituality with rationality. Our essence, they said, was made up of abstractions and principles, which only reason could access. They taught that the purpose of knowledge was to purify the soul by conducting it from sensory data to abstract principles, from the particular facts to universal truths. One recommended starting with the study of nature, then logic, then mathematics. Science was prominent in the religion, and information and scientific discoveries came to Muslim territory and were able to be widespread throughout the world due to good trading routes. They even had extensive libraries attached to mosques. An Islamic evolutionary theory was espoused as early as the 9th century, involving animal embryology, adaptation, and animal psychology. Many approaches to evolution have been taught in Islamic institutions, reserving the beginning of life as God's work. However, contemporary Islamic societies tend to reject the theory of evolution, particularly as it applies to humans, and the religion seems to have lost its scientific momentum. A central tenet of Hinduism is the lack of a strict distinction between God and creature. Science has been a paramount part of that culture. Hinduism required the knowledge of astronomy, linguistics, and mathematics. Astronomy was needed to determine the timing of rituals. Linguistics developed out of the need to formalize classical Sanskrit used in rituals. And these rituals required the building of large altars to hold the offerings from the people. They needed geometry for that purpose. Math in particular played a central role due to the large numbers used in the texts. They ended up developing the number 0 as a placeholder. Hinduism held that God uses evolution to create current life forms, and scientific discoveries were foretold in the texts. Physical and spiritual evolution is ultimately a manifestation of God. So obviously, Hinduism has enthusiastically incorporated a theory of evolution into its dogma. Buddhism, as practiced in China and Japan, does not require a belief in God or the soul. It holds to metaphysical teachings, including karma, the no-self, and cycle of rebirth. Originally, the idea of Darwinism was seen by Buddhists as antithetical, but they were looking at it as the survival of cultures, social Darwinism. And that sort of competition amongst them did not fit with their principle of living harmoniously with nature. The aspect of survival of the fittest also appeared inconsistent with its teachings around the idea of rebirth, which could involve a theological promotion or demotion. However, it was later determined that the theory of evolution was all about cooperation and did fit into the lines of the teaching. Buddhism treats Western science not as something to be passively received, but subject to creative interpretation. Science, ethics, and Judaism are considered to be harmonious. Jews accepted biological evolution, but rejected natural selection as the mechanism for evolution. The science of evolution is treated as part of the unfolding of reality. This unfolding of reality should be taken scientifically and not as preordained in the texts. You might be asking yourself, why am I talking about these religions and how they dealt with the theory of evolution and not some other scientific thought? The reason is that evolution presents a unique lens for discerning the relationship between science and religion. It posits change that occurs naturally and purposefully, which challenges the concept of an omnipotent God or gods. What I found in this inquiry is that while there may be resistance to scientific thought in religious teachings, that resistance is not a matter of turning a blind eye to what is revealed in nature, but in how nature's revelation is interpreted as impacting the power of God. Religions appear to be open to scientific development, but they reserve ultimate explanations for our observations to the realm of God. Religions appear to be open to, there will always be one more question: why or from what? Religions are comfortable with answering that question with God, a scientific placeholder of sorts. Science urges us to keep exploring, pushing the boundaries of what we know. As Neil deGrasse Tyson said, as the area of our knowledge grows, so does the perimeter of our ignorance. There must be that give and take among them. Religion and science don't always have to agree on things, but they need each other to challenge and inspire. As one grows, so does the other, because they both seek a better understanding of the universe. As people might see there always being a conflict between the two, I see a world that has grown together and flourished to a point. The world requires explanations, and that is what we get from science and religion. Explanations of our origins and why we are here. We all need something that gives us a reason to exist. Where you get that reason is up to you. If you find it in being a part of our congregation and the community it has created, then I welcome you to our church home. I might be a person who does not like religion, but I feel that I understand the need for it a bit better after going through the research for this sermon. I no longer see religion as enforced ignorance, but as a contextualizing force. And those who would choose to rely on a higher force rather than deal with nature's unfolding are doing themselves and their own religion a disservice. So I leave you with this. Whether or not you believe in God, your religion probably calls on you to pay attention to science and adapt your thinking accordingly. Because it is God's nature you are understanding, and because maybe God sent a scientist to help you gain that understanding. In sum, we don't jump the track between science and religion when nature is explained in scientific terms. We roll with the flow between what we understand